So Rinpoche started off by mentioning what Lama Yeshe used to say, the benefit we didn't die is to meet again. So of course this really, maybe there are other different ways of looking at it, but it was like a way of making us thinking about how, not everybody was here the last time, is here now because of having died, several people, and it could be any of us. By the next time, it could be any of us that goes even during this course. It does happen that people die on meditation courses. And then for the, the people who are supposedly not here, let me mention the two people that have not heard Lam Rim teachings before. That might be because when I turned around, I actually only saw two people with their hands up. But there could have been more, because I can't actually see that far necessarily without my glasses on. Anyway, so I think that's where the two came from. And so, the basic message for them, actually, of course, very useful for all of us, was that despite being very well educated, there are so many people in the world, in our world, who still put happiness based on external sources, happiness from the outside, at the top of the list. And this is despite the fact that, in actual fact, happiness that you get from that kind of source doesn't increase, which means the more you use it doesn't increase. Like the more money you have doesn't guarantee that you're going to be more happy. Actually, doesn't even guarantee you're going to be happy at all. But certainly, the more money you get doesn't guarantee that you're going to be more happy, and so on. And also, it doesn't bring satisfaction. So Rinpoche mentioned, it's something that we're all very well aware of, that you get one, you want two, you get two, you want four, and you make $1 million, you want $1 billion, and so on. And it doesn't bring satisfaction. Like toad of toad hall, always wanting to go on to something else and thinking that's the best one. But it doesn't work. Whereas with Dharma happiness, then that's something that the more you do, the more happiness there is, the more the happiness increases. And it actually brings satisfaction. So the suffering of having and the suffering of not having. So everybody that's mostly concerned with getting happiness from the outside has got that. When you haven't got it, there's a suffering of not having it. When you have it, there's a suffering of having it, having to keep it, having to guard it, having to increase it, and so on. That was the morning session. So this is mainly to just help, to remind, right? This is mainly review. There might be some things that I can clarify, but mainly it's to just refresh in our minds, bring back what Rinpoche taught. And then, so I'll talk a little bit about what he said in the afternoon, and then we can have questions if there are any questions, and if they're not, then we can, or if there are after that, then we can do a little bit of meditation. So we then Rinpoche started off by talking about in the afternoon of on Monday It's Thursday. It's Thursday today. Yeah, okay, so that was 3 days ago. So afternoon, not on the afternoon, the second afternoon session, or the evening session anyway. Well, anyway, the evening session. The subject that we're dealing with is the stages of the gradual path that leads to Buddhahood, Sangye. And so they often say, Sangye, the complete purification and fully evolved, all of the faults purified and all of the qualities fully developed. And Rinpoche has often been using the expression totally eliminated all faults. It's like a state of being where you've totally eliminated all faults and you have achieved all or accomplished all realizations. So you have this is something that you hear a lot in Tibetan. Gyön Kunsel, Yönding Kunden. Gyön Kunsel, you've eliminated all faults. Yönding Kunden, now you have all the qualities, all the realizations. And so, yes, in one way, if you practice the stage of the path to enlightenment, then gradually the happiness and the satisfaction increases more and more until you get the perfect, state of Buddhahood. No more faults, no more limitations, no more suffering, and having all of the realizations, fully developed compassion and love and so on. Then, so this kind of is a theme that Rinpoche has been coming back to, the fact that we have this choice. It all comes from the mind. You either take the choice of following a path that leads to real happiness, or a path which just leads to suffering, more samsara, more psychic existence. So then, the kind of suffering, we have the three types of suffering. Suffering of suffering, it's usually called, refers to what we generally everybody recognizes as suffering, the suffering of pain, suffering of sickness and so on. Then the suffering of change, which is what you might call samsaric happiness, normal happiness from eating food and drink and so on, what we usually call pleasure. And then the pervasive compounded suffering. Pervasive because wherever you are and wherever you're born, as long as you're in cyclic existence, you have this suffering. But actually, so Buddha taught those, and they're important to meditate on, but then His Holiness the Dalai Lama often mentions the main thing to meditate on when the Buddha said about the truth of suffering, that suffering is to be understood. It was this third one. Why? Because everybody, you don't need to sort of meditate deeply to convince yourself that the suffering of suffering is something you don't want. Even animals know that. You just don't need to, you don't need analysis and logic and so on, deep reflection. And the suffering of change, well, for us, it takes a lot of thought, but it's also something that's the understanding that the suffering of change is not satisfactory and that there's something better is not something also unique to the Buddha, to the Buddha's teaching. There are, not so much in the West, but in the East, and particularly in India, there are these ancient traditions where they have methods for achieving high levels of realization where you go beyond not just the suffering of suffering, but even the suffering of change. You kind of the emphasis is more on peace rather than happiness, the peaceful mind where your mind is in a kind of neutral state and you don't experience any kind of pain or pleasure. So even that wasn't unique to the Buddha's teaching. The one that's unique is the pervasive compounded suffering, and that's not so easy to understand, really. Well, except in a way it is, but that expression, pervasive compounded suffering, what does it actually refer to? What does it actually mean? It's sometimes you hear, our lives are either kind of like revolving between these three. We have sometimes a suffering of suffering, sometimes there's pain, sometimes there's pleasure, sometimes there's neither one nor the other. So even when there's no suffering of suffering, no suffering of change, in other words, no pleasure, no pain, when the mind is neutral, there's still the pervasive compounded suffering. So what is it that's always there? Actually, not just in between, like in the breaks in between the suffering of suffering and suffering of change, but actually at all times. What is it that's there all the time? It's actually, and what is it that's so like profound about that? Well, what's there all the times is the what we call the so the contaminated, appropriated aggregates, they saw, which basically means our 5 aggregates that we have at the moment, where we haven't gone beyond karma and the causes of karma, the afflictions and the imprints of the afflictions. So as long as we have those, then we are prone to suffer in various ways. We're stuck in psychic existence, we're not beyond suffering. So really, when you talk about the pervasive compounded suffering, it's basically talking about the aggregates that we have at the moment, the body and mind that we have at the moment. And another simple way, I think the simplest way of putting it is, the pervasive compounded suffering means simply not having gone beyond karma and the mental afflictions. It means that, really. So with the suffering of suffering, it's temporary. What that means is, like, no matter how bad it might get, things might get, it never lasts. And no matter, in terms of, like, if we think about the suffering of the lower realms, or the pain that we experience in this life, at least it's going to come to an end by dying. So it's not, it can end just by dying. That doesn't mean to say it's not going to happen again, but, that suffering can end because of dying. Suffering of change will come to an end. But the pervasive compounded suffering doesn't come to an end just by dying, or just by waiting around for it to come to an end. It only comes to an end by practicing the path, practicing a method which overcomes it. And really, the method is wisdom, developing wisdom, the wisdom understanding, the absolute reality, understanding emptiness. Yeah. Maybe that's enough for that. Yeah, I mean, there's we call it contaminated, appropriated aggregates, right? So I talked about the 5 aggregates on one of the previous days, and it basically means your body and mind, right? Then the contaminated, meaning the sort of like this refers to the association with the mental afflictions, the delusions, the klesha, the fact that we still have them, along with their imprints. But then the appropriated, but Rinpoche didn't particularly talk about that, so we don't need to talk about that. But I think it's a bit strange calling it appropriated aggregates. You can make sense of it, because you think appropriate means to take, and you think, oh yeah, as you go from life to life, you take new sets of aggregates. But when you look at Pabonga Dejan Rinpoche's explanation of this in Liberation, he doesn't really talk about it in terms of taking rebirth, taking new aggregates. It's more sort of like the connection is made more with the afflictions. So he says that these aggregates are called appropriated, but in the Tibetan it's nyawa lempe pumpo. So this word also comes up in the 12 links when they talk about craving and grasping, so grasping. And he says it's really to do with their mental afflictions. So these aggregates are called appropriated aggregates. I'll carry on using the word appropriated, even though it doesn't really make much sense. You could actually just as well say grasping aggregates, although I think there are some people who would disagree with that. I know I've seen a discussion taking place in the FPMT amongst some quite, good scholars, and they disagree with that. But anyway, it's what it looks like in the Liberation. So the Pabonga Rinpoche talks about the appropriated aggregates, the grasping aggregates, being called grasping because they're a product of grasping, in the sense of product of the afflictions. They're produced by the afflictions. The afflictions, the mental afflictions, or the klesha, the delusions arise, And due to that, we create karma, and because of that karma, we have this particular situation, this particular life, these aggregates, this body and mind. So they're a product of the afflictions. So, in a sense, they're the afflicted aggregates because they're a product of the afflictions. They're called the afflicted aggregates because they come along with the afflictions, and they're called the afflicted aggregates because they produce afflictions. So he gives the analogy, like a grass fire is called a grass fire because it's a fire that's kind of like produced from grass, grass burning, like a wood fire, caused by wood. And then it's called, he uses the analogy for why they're called afflicted aggregates due to being associated with the afflictions, the mental afflictions, like the king's men. So even though the king's men are not the king, but they're associated with the king. So, afflicted aggregates, the aggregates which have got the afflictions always kind of like they're part of them. Something like that. And then they're called afflicted aggregates, appropriated aggregates, because they produce afflictions, just like a medicine tree is called a medicine tree because it produces medicine. Those are the analogies that he uses. So either way, anyway, our mind, we have that choice, and that choice, and all of that comes out of our mind. If we make the choice, then we carry on with the suffering. If we make the choice, then we find a way out of that suffering. In that way, samsara, nirvana, they all come from the mind. The mind has the potential for all of that. So it's all created by the mind. So Rinpoche has, not hesitated to talk several times about the suffering of the hell realm. So that's also created by the mind. And then there's the kind of like unbounded bliss of enlightenment. That's also created by the mind. So we don't need to feel hopeless in the sense, like, what can you do? The suffering is there and you can't change things. There's the enlightenment and you can't achieve it, but actually we have the potential for all of that. And actually I find it really quite strange in a way and quite amazing. There's Dagre Rinpoche often quotes from Nagpopa, who said that enlightenment is something that hasn't been kept by somebody else up until now. Our enlightenment, the enlightenment we're going to achieve one day, that hasn't been kept by someone else up until now, and it won't be given to us in the future. It's right there. It's right there, right now. So then it almost sounds like we're already enlightened, but of course we know that's wrong. But it's really quite strange, when you achieve enlightenment, the enlightenment you achieve is actually, it's like the mind you have at the moment. You take the obscurations away. They talk about the two types of obscuration: the afflictive obscurations, knowledge obscurations. Those obscurations which principally prevent us from achieving. I've just realized I think I'm talking a bit too fast. I was just suddenly started thinking of the translators. Okay, slow down. Slow down a bit. So you have what they call the afflictive obscurations and the klesha varana. Those are what principally prevent us from achieving liberation. It's like they're what stand between us and liberation. They're part of us, and if they weren't there, we'd be liberated. So there's a path of practice and meditation which helps us to remove those obscurations, and we can achieve liberation. But actually, even then, it's quite strange because where do those obscurations go to? Actually, I find myself using this hand gesture of like, taking them out. But you don't take the obscurations out anywhere. It's just a question of changing the mind, isn't it? So it's the same with, then you take the knowledge obscurations, which are what mainly prevent us from achieving that highest potential of Buddhahood, where you've eliminated all faults and achieved all realizations. So isn't that a bit strange, those obscurations? It's like you've got it's as if you have your omniscient mind there right now, and the obscurations, and you take the obscurations away, and then what? Then you have the omniscient mind, but it was already there. That doesn't work, does it? Because then it's like you've got an obscured Buddha inside, and that doesn't make sense. But it's kind of strange, isn't it? And kind of amazing. Your enlightenment that you achieve one day, that we have the possibility of achieving, it's, your omniscient mind, it's not somewhere else. It's not like somebody else is keeping it back for a while until you deserve it or something. It's not somewhere else. And so it hasn't been kept by somebody else up until now. And it's not going to be given to us in the future by someone else. So then what? It's there right now, isn't it? That's kind of amazing. So all of the Buddha's 84,000 teachings, which are antidotes to 84,000 afflictions, as well as all of the practices we associate with Je Rinpoche, Lama Tsongkhapa, the three principal aspects of the path, the stages of the gradual path. It's all aimed at helping us to understand our mind, and in other words, who we are, and it's all aimed at being able to achieve that kind of potential. And well, this was also actually supposedly for the new people who don't know Lam Rim, but actually I think for all of us, because anyway, yes, you listen to these teachings and you don't understand, and sometimes you wonder what's the point. But the thing is, there's Rinpoche gave the story of Lodro Denpa, Stiramati, student of Vasubandhu, who got to be where he was because of being a pigeon who listened to Vasubandhu teaching, and he became a great master in the Abhidharma. So, like life to life, that happened because of the imprints, right? But even in a more just like ordinary level, you hear it once and you don't understand, but actually you get some familiarity. You listen again, you can listen the next time, and somehow you can understand it better. The reason is because you listened to it before, even though you felt like, you didn't understand. There's some imprints, actually some kind of familiarity begins. And that familiarity becomes the basis for it to become even more and more familiar and more clear. And Rinpoche finished that day talking about, explaining a little bit from the beginning of this, the bodhicitta motivation that he has expressed, the wish that we will all use each day. And so that's something he wants to teach before starting on the light of the path, lamp of the path. And yes, this is where. So we don't. It doesn't really make sense to be working with the text at the moment until Rinpoche's gone through it and has a version that can act as a basis for our practice, daily practice. But he started talking about the beginning of that, where you come across the subject of the guru devotion, and the text expresses the aspiration to be able to practice just like the youthful Norzang, who Sudodana maybe. Anyway, he's mentioned in the Lamrim Chenmo and the mid-length Lamrim. And you can see the kind of the level of his devotion and deep appreciation for and affection towards his gurus. It's really quite special, that. And then the always crying bodhisattva. And as he mentioned, I mean, those are just two that are explicitly stated there. There are many others like Milarepa, Chayulwa, who got the realization just by serving his guru, not during meditation, but while he was on his way down the steps from caring from his guru, he kind of like gained this realization. Okay, so were there some questions from that? No. Yes.
I know several times I think this point is very important. There are several times when Rinpoche said, this in particular is very important, or I think this is very, he said several times, and then sometimes he seemed to, just immediately after saying that, he started telling stories. And so I lost the thread of exactly what he meant was very important.
I don't really know what to say about that.
I felt like I think it was the first day. He had the text, and it was just,
Can you give me a rough idea of like the area that he was talking about, to help remind?
No, sorry.
Well, I mean, we already know from day one, two really important things that came up. One is that, when you do look for happiness on the outside, it doesn't increase. Happiness, that kind of happiness doesn't increase, and it doesn't bring satisfaction. And the other thing that was, Rinpoche did very much emphasize is you have the choice. Even right now, you have the choice whether to suffer or be happy, whether to act with anger or patience, with love or hatred, and so on. Even right now, it's not just like somewhere off in the distance, enlightenment and liberation and so on. Even right now, you have the choice. That might not have been what you wanted to hear, but anyway, he did say that, and I can't think otherwise what he might have meant. Yeah.
One thing that I have written down from the first evening session on Monday and the 7:30 session towards the end of my notes is, I've got written down, most important practice was that as soon as our eyes open to transform our mind into the bodhicitta mind, and that should be one of our life's goals. I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to.
Getting bodhicitta. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that makes sense that Rinpoche would have said that was important. Okay.
I think it was in the context of motivation. The most important thing is motivation. Sorry, say Paul? Yeah. Yeah, I was waiting.
You said that he said something about motivation. I didn't quite catch all that.
He was saying the most important thing is motivation. A lot of the, because he, bodhicitta comes into it, but it was sort of like motivation determines whether you're changing your mind or not.
Yes. Yeah, I think he said that. I think you're right, yes.
And motivation is what makes it Dharma.
Yes.
Dharma.
Yeah. Yeah, he did say that. And yeah, that's really key, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Steve?
Where's that noise? Oh, okay. Yes.
Okay. Can you speak a little bit more about the unification of Dharma and politics?
Dharma and politics. That was yesterday.
That was last night.
Yeah, this is Monday.
Okay. Sorry.
I mean, I think in a way it's quite a simple idea that when you engage in so-called politics and with a good heart, then that's a unification of the politics and what was it? Politics and Dharma. Politics and Dharma. Yeah. When you talk about a unification of politics and Dharma, it's another way of saying how to make politics dharma. And the way it becomes dharma is your motivation, isn't it? So when you're engaged in politics with a good heart, then it's going to be dharma, isn't it? When it's not just for power, when it's not just for money, it's not just for your own personal gain. If it is, then it's politics which is not dharma. And that's, he was making the point about, in the States, we like right from the beginning, there has been this strong emphasis on a division of religion and politics, because otherwise, if the religion is not dharma, if the religion is also like motivated by just the desire for power and wealth, then when that gets in control of the politics, then it's a disaster for everybody. But if the religion is actually dharma, in the sense of not just whether we talk about Christian religion or Buddhist religion or whatever religion, it's not just the form, but actually it's the good heart, then when it gets involved in the politics, it's only going to bring about a good outcome, isn't it? You know, like politics, which is qualified by tolerance and wisdom and so on.
En Spanish. Spanish. Una pregunta.
Sí.
Pudiera ser un ejemplo de política y dharma como Mandela. Pregunto.
Mandela will be an example of unification of politics and dharma, she asked.
Yeah, probably. I mean, you know, you sort of got this, in the early days, I think that, well, I don't know if he really was involved in violent means or people just said he was, but anyway, what you see of the person, you know, that became the president and so on, I mean, he seemed to combine the two. But I mean, you know, the main thing is, in general, you can see that if you have, you know, when your politics are coming from a good heart, then there would be a unification of politics and religion. But I guess he would have been a pretty good example.
So this another aspect of that question. You were talking about pervasive suffering and compounded sufferings. If we look at political religious heroes, such as His Holiness the Dalai Lama or Gandhi, or some of the people we see who do really brave acts and end up in prison, would that be an example of pervasive compounded suffering? And in our own lives, if we do decide to take an activist stand on something using a combination of our motivation and our practice out of a good heart and a good motivation, are there things we can do to lighten those outcomes?
Well, pervasive suffering is basically just having, like I said, having the 5 aggregates under the control of Carlier, like not beyond karma and the afflictions, kind of unenlightened aggregates, unliberated aggregates. I don't know really what that's got to do with the, like political activism. I mean, you know, that kind of suffering is there. This is why it's called pervasive. It's there at all times, whoever you are, as long as you haven't yet achieved liberation and enlightenment.
So how does that affect the king's men?
How does that affect the king's men?
I've got no idea what you mean by that.
Well, you used that as an example from Paul.
The thing about that's an analogy, right? So the king's men, yes. They're called the king's men because of, being under the control of the king, being under the power of the king. So the aggregates are called, like appropriated aggregates or grasping aggregates because of being controlled by the grasping and attachment and the delusions and so on. It's an analogy, right, to understand why they're called grasping or appropriated aggregates. I'm sorry I wasn't really able to answer your question. Maybe this one last, and then we can spend a little bit of time meditating.
Venerable Steve, hello, over here.
Okay.
I have a follow-up question from a question that was asked yesterday afternoon. When Rinpoche said, what I wrote down is before the Guru, there was no what is called Buddha.
Mm-hmm.
That statement.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wrote down, the meaning is very profound. All the 3 times Buddhas come from the Guru. So I think I understand some of that, in that I, as an example, I had too many aspirations to be directly benefited by Buddha Shakyamuni, it seems like. And so the Guru, I need a holy being who appears to me in a form that I can see, given my own obscurations, etc. And that's what the Guru does. So that part I understand, but I don't understand how that connects to all the 3 times Buddhas come from the Guru, unless it means that my experience of the 3 times Buddhas is only because the Guru shows them to me. And I thought what he said was that the Guru is more kind than the Buddhas. And it seemed to me that if I understood that right, or more compassionate, if I heard that correctly, if that is what he said, that I don't understand that, because it seems like ultimate compassion is ultimate, and one Buddha is not more compassionate than another Buddha. So there's just sort of confusion for me. I get some of it, but not all of it.
Okay, that was quite a long question. So anyway, I'll just say 1 or 2 things about that which I think might help. When we say that all the Buddhas of the 3 times come from the Guru, well, yes, I think on one level you could understand it as meaning if the Guru didn't tell you about them, you wouldn't know about them. I mean, you could understand it on that way. But I think that it goes deeper than that. So if you think of this in terms of something Rinpoche briefly, mentioned, that there is a difference between the absolute Guru and the conventional Guru. Like there's no difference when he was talking about the Vajrasattva, Vajradhara, is just different, like hand gestures and so on. Maybe different color, but actually it's the same person. So the thing is, those different appearances are the conventional Guru, the ones that you can sort of see. The ultimate Guru refers to you could say the Dharmakaya, or you could say like the Buddha's omniscient mind. It's the Buddha's mind, in other words. So all of the Buddhas of so that's your Guru, right? So that's your that's your ultimate Guru. Ultimate Guru here, not so much like the one which is empty of true existence, like when we talk about ultimate truth, conventional truth. The ultimate truth is emptiness. The ultimate Guru, in the sense of like really, when you see those different appearances. Those are just appearances. When you go really deep into what behind those appearances, actually where they're coming from is the ultimate Guru, the Dharmakaya. And all of those different appearances of the millions of mandalas and deities, and 1,000 Buddhas, and 35 Buddhas, and you can go further. All of the holy objects, the scriptures, all of the gurus of the lineage and so on, the gurus in our lives, they're all manifestations of that Dharmakaya. So, it's a little bit like it explains in some of the teachings where you have the sort of like step-by-step build-up of the Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, so the Dharmakaya basically refers to the Buddha's very pure, kind of like all-encompassing mind. I mean, we can say more about that, and if there's time, I will do. But anyway, it's the Buddha's omniscient mind, right? all-pervasive. That's the Dharmakaya. Now, that's something that only other enlightened beings can perceive. So the Buddha, in order to be able to benefit others, appears in various ways. So enjoyment body, the Sambhogakaya, is something which can be perceived by the high-level bodhisattvas, the Arya bodhisattvas, the bodhisattvas who have a direct realization of emptiness. So it can appear in that form, and that they can, because even they can't perceive the Dharmakaya, and they can't be benefited directly by it. So the way that the guru, the ultimate guru, the Dharmakaya, that omniscient mind, benefits others, is by appearing as a Sambhogakaya, the enjoyment body, for those who have that kind of karma and level of realization and so on. So it depends completely on their minds. The Buddha appearing in that way completely depends upon their minds, those high-level bodhisattvas. And then for others appears in the form of the Namanakaya, more ordinary people, but still people that have to have very special karma. So that especially means like what they call the supreme emanation body, the supreme Namanakaya, which in our lives, in our times, refers to Buddha Shakyamuni coming into the world, showing the achievement of enlightenment, turning the wheel of Dharma, and so on, and everything we know about his life. So that's like supreme emanation body, and those people, that their minds were kind of like receptive and had the kind of like the karma and so on, so they could perceive that. But we don't have that kind of, our minds are not like that, so we can't perceive that kind of thing even. But what we can perceive is that Dharmakaya when it appears in an ordinary form, in other words, appearing to have faults, as Rinpoche says, His Holiness explained, like the guru who's teaching us now, the other gurus like His Holiness the Dalai Lama. You look at His Holiness Dalai Lama, you look at the Khyentse of Rinpoche, actually you're looking at the Dharmakaya appearing to you in a way that you can relate to. You couldn't really relate to, you couldn't be benefited by anything more pure than that, something less pure than that. The Dharmakaya can appear in the form of a dog, but you're not going to go to take teachings from a dog. And anyway, the dogs, well, I don't know if dogs can talk. Maybe if you found a dog that could talk, you would listen to it. I don't know. But anyway, it's that idea, the Buddhas of the three times, it's almost like the Buddhas of the three times, all of the Buddhas of the past, present, and future, for example, which means it including all of the holy objects, the scriptures and so on, they are all actually manifestations of the Dharmakaya, which is the real guru, they also use this word like definitive and interpretive, the definitive guru, the ultimate guru, the Dharmakaya, and all of those are manifestations of that. So that would be a good thing to think about for a few minutes. Okay, we'll have a short break for meditation. So let's take that as the sort of topic to meditate on and reflect on in view of what Rinpoche explained to us a few days ago, and in terms of what we've just been talking about just now. The Guru is the source of all of the Buddhas of the past, present, and future. And then we can have a short meditation thinking how that, the kindness of that guru. So our present life is can be described completely in terms of these three kinds of suffering: suffering of suffering, suffering of change, pervasive, compounded suffering. The suffering of having these aggregates, body and mind aggregates, which are produced by the karma and the mental afflictions and haven't gone beyond the karma and afflictions. They're still there. So that's our situation at the moment, and we have a choice. We have the possibility of going beyond that. And it's the Guru who made us aware of that and who has the method to give us to be able to go beyond that. Okay, wakey, wakey. I don't have a bell, so I have to say something stupid. And then Tuesday, Rinpoche started off by picking up the text for the Tibetan text for the bodhicitta motivation for life. As Rinpoche mentioned, actually it means lives, because it's not just for this life but all of our future lives up until we achieve enlightenment. And he mentioned that it was his wish for us to do this each morning, something to think the moment you open your eyes. And I think then the connection here, so Rinpoche started talking about how His Holiness says, yes, and it's true, of course, in general, we need to respect other faiths and so on, whatever their beliefs might be. But the fact is, because then I thought he was going to say, the fact is they're wrong or something, but he didn't say that. He said, the fact is, whatever the religion is, anyway, the fact is that you have a choice right now. You think this way, you'll be happy. You think this way, you're going to be unhappy. And so I think that somewhere in that first page, maybe even on the title page, it talks about, at this juncture where we have the choice. So the idea of choice comes up. And so in one way, if we think in one way, we have samsara. If we think in one way, we have liberation and enlightenment. And so yes, and then so the kind of long term, not just right now. Yes, right now, but also not just right now. Long term. If our mind works in a particular way, then it brings the suffering of the hell realms. And Rinpoche talked a little bit about that. And there's one or two things I thought would be good to mention there. Okay, so yeah, the suffering, there are 8 levels of the hot hells, right? So the deepest one is called the hell of unceasing torment, where you can't actually tell there's somebody there except by the sound of the screaming. Sounds, yeah. It's interesting. They say, something. This is something you don't even want to hear. Even the words. It's almost like it's a word you don't really want to say, kind of thing. You don't want to say hell. Don't really say it. You don't want to hear it, and certainly don't want to think about it. And I think that's a kind of an indication it wouldn't be very nice to go to. Anyway. So yeah, then the fire, talking about the fire of the hell realms. Well, basically, if you maybe other lamrims also have the explanation, but in the Shama lamrim, which is one of the more recent lamrim, which is going to be taught by, the transmissions are going to be given by His Holiness as one of the 18 lamrim teachings that he's been giving in the south of India for the last couple of years. So the Shama lamrim, really, really amazing. Lamrim teaching. So there he explains very clearly. So it actually builds it up, right? There's this kind of fire, like the fire from grass burning, and 7 times hotter than that, there's this kind of fire. I can't remember the exact details, but anyway, he gets up to the fire at the end of the eon, is what they call it. The one where the whole kind of like universe just goes up in flames. And so that fire is so hot that it can melt rocks, mountains. So there's that one. So 7 times hotter than that is the temperature of the fire in the first of the hot hells, the one that's called the reviving hell, we usually call it, the one where they kind of fight and fight and fight, and then they all die, and then eventually this kind of like cool breeze comes, and the voice is heard. You have to live again. You have to come back to life. Then they could get up and they start fighting again. So that's the temperature there, and then it sort of gets worse and worse. So that's the thing about the 7 times hotter. So it's 7 times hotter than the fire in that first level of hell is 7 times hotter than the fire that causes the whole universe to just go up in flames. And so in comparison to that, yes, that fire of the end of the eon is like air conditioning. Can you imagine? Like a snowflake falling. And then the things about the volcanoes, I think we don't need to go there. I think that Rinpoche's analysis there is one that sort of like fits in with the classical view of the Earth being flat and the hells being so many, miles below the Earth. And because His Holiness says there are certain things in the Abhidharma that are obviously not true, and you just don't have to, you don't have to accept them. And he talks specifically about the flat Earth, but there are some other things that have to go along with it, which is like if you look at literally if you calculate where the hell realms would be according to the classical explanations, they'd be, like if it's so many miles below, if it's that number of miles below Bodh Gaya, then it would be somewhere on the way to the moon. It'd be out in space, and that's not going to be very hot there. So there's a few things that don't seem to work, and maybe the idea that the volcanoes coming from this neighboring hell called the Churabme, so like the river of burning river kind of thing. I can't remember what they usually call it. So then that could probably make sense. So that's one of the things that you have the choice about. I mean, you see, it's interesting because we talk about having no choice. In samsara, you have no choice. We're complete. It's all a question of karma, right? So then Rinpoche is talking about having choice. So the thing is, not having choice means when this life comes to an end, that's not when you get the choice. You get to make a choice. Okay, well, I've heard about these hell realms. I think I won't go there. I think I'll go to, maybe I'll just go to a Pure Land. Why not? Let's go to a Pure Land. You don't get that kind of choice. You don't get to make that kind of choice. But where you do get the choice is in terms of which kind of causes you're going to create for what kind of future, and in terms of purifying the causes for suffering and so on. We have that choice. The choice about whether we create the causes for more suffering, and the choice about purifying and so on. You have that choice. And all of that, so the suffering of the hell realms, hot hells, cold hells, the Preta realms, animals, that's the one that you can see. His Holiness often says, even if you can't really relate to these other realms which you can't see, it doesn't matter. Just think about the human suffering. I think actually, because of course the human one is the one that you can see, but we can also see the suffering of animals, and there's no reason why we want to say there's no animal realm, because you can see there's an animal realm, and you can see the suffering they experience, which is just, it's unbelievable. Especially the suffering that they have to undergo at the hands of human beings. It's just unbelievable. So then there's also the suffering of the humans, at least birth, aging, sickness and death and so on, not being able to get what you want, not being able to hold on to the things that you like, having to experience unwanted problems one after another, that kind of thing. The sufferings of the gods, the ones like the demigods that are always fighting with the gods. Then some of the gods, they also get involved in fighting. Then higher levels, they don't have that kind of problem, so much bliss. But then it all comes to an end eventually. What's the point? I mean, really, what's the point? I mean, of course, yes, it would be nice. The idea of the pleasure is nicer than the idea of the pain, but it's such a tragedy, really, to think of using this opportunity that we have now for that, which is going to come to an end eventually. So all that comes from ignorance. And again, also, like His Holiness says something very interesting here, I think, which is that, we all want happiness and nobody wants suffering, and yet we're always experiencing suffering. And we experience suffering because we created the causes for suffering. It doesn't happen just by itself. It's not inflicted on us by somebody else. It's because we created the cause. But we don't want the suffering, so it must have been because we didn't know that we created the causes for suffering. So it's ignorance. It comes down to ignorance. So like Rinpoche says, it all comes down to ignorance. There's the ignorance. Not knowing the difference between what's virtue and what's non-virtue. What's a skillful action, what's an unskillful action. What's dharma and what's not dharma. And on the deepest level, not knowing that everything is merely labeled by the mind. So when things appear like they're not merely labeled by the mind, we believe that. So we think that they're real, they exist from their own side, not just merely labeled by our minds. And then that's the basis for all of the other mental afflictions. And although Rinpoche didn't mention this time specifically, but on many occasions he suggests something very, very, very interesting experiment, actually. Even without having realized emptiness, what you can do is you can put yourself into that sort of like a space in your meditation where you're thinking your I and everything else, but particularly your own I, is merely labeled by the mind, doesn't exist in the way of appearing. And then you try to keep mindful of that outside of the meditation. So the theory is, as long as you remain mindful of that, the mental afflictions of attachment and anger won't be able to arise. And when you find, as we do, that actually at a certain point they do arise, actually you realize it's because you forgot. You forgot. So it's a very interesting experiment to do, one that we can all do. So all of that comes from the mind. And the mind itself is beginningless and endless, and its nature is that it's colorless, shapeless, formless. So Rinpoche mentioned a couple of ways that you can meditate on the nature of the mind. There's two ways, and he specifically said, not that there are only two, there could be others, but here are two ways. One is that, meditating on the mind being colorless, shapeless, formless. And I asked about that. That sounds like an analytic meditation. And so he says, yes, it starts off like that. In other words, you need to think about it a bit to get a sort of an idea, to get clear to yourself what the object of meditation is. What is it I'm meditating on when I'm meditating on something, this mind which is colorless, shapeless, formless, devoid of all kind of physical attributes. And then once you've sort of like got an idea, even if it's not perfectly clear, you've got a little bit of an idea, you place your mind in that awareness, and you do your meditation. The other way is, for mind meditating on mind, is you simply watch the thoughts. And so you don't stop the thoughts from arising. Quite a lot of the time, when we're doing meditation, if distraction arises, we have to stop the distraction, right? But here you don't, everything is allowed to arise, but you just observe it. You don't get involved in it, you don't get sucked into it. Even when your mind is distracted to external sounds and movement and so on. You can just watch. You don't get sucked into it thinking about it. You're just aware, just watching as the thoughts and so on arise and go and rise and go. And just allowing whatever thought arises to arise. Like watching TV without getting sucked into the stories. Okay, so we'll stop by doing a little bit of meditation on that. So again, you have the choice then. You can meditate on the nature of mind, thinking how it's colorless, shapeless, formless. Or meditate on the mind by simply watching the thoughts. So we can dedicate with the Long Life Prayer on page 325. Vijaya, O conquering goddess, whose lunar-like face changes without changing fates, the faintest cooling ray of whose mantra name allays the fiery pain of our life's final end. Rainmaker adept who brings forth life's rain, here, now, grant your greatest of gifts. Victorious goddess, grant life without end. Hear our prayer, O Lama, whom we revere, you who bear the name of he who peerlessly holds the living essence of the pure paradigmatic doctrine of the victors, of he alone adornment of the earth, of he a guide to sublime liberation, the sphere of peace, precious treasure of precise and subtle reasoning, golden laser light of bright unerring wisdom, clarifying without confusion the two truths amongst the multiplicity of things. Lama, remain immutably amongst us, a radiant Dharma sun, skilled in sprinkling the waters of healing, fulfilling needs, benefiting all. A laughing smile, revealing pearls of skill, humility, and constancy. A deep milking sea of the liquid moon of morality. Lama, remain immutably amongst us, one supremely worthy of veneration. The moon of your Mahayana mind, ringed round by the fever-cooling camphor of unsullied, unsurpassed resolve, brilliantly swirls to the bounds of space, unbounded seas of the happiness of now and bliss of always. Lama, remain immutably amongst us, a moon guiding our way. Your teachings are vast-spreading rivers of celestial nectars, your dialectics an invincible cutting Vajra weapon, your writings 1,000-petaled lotuses unfolding their glory. Lama, remain immutably amongst us, a guardian of highest knowledge. By the might of seas of spiritual masters, deities and doctrine protectors, by the power of profound dependent arising and the unvarying emptiness of all that appears, may all the hopes of our prayers with effortless ease be spontaneously fulfilled. If you look at page 323, Kanji Rawe Kowe Shingandi Bendan Dewa Malu Jungwene Jenre Ziwan Denzin Gyazo Yi Shabe Site Badu Thank you, cheers. We dedicate all of the virtue of doing this, of this session, as well as all of the virtue of the past, present, and future of oneself and all others, including all the bodhisattvas and all the enlightened beings. Dedicate all that to the lasting happiness and peace of all living beings, to each and every one of them, immediately, as quickly as possible, going beyond all of the suffering of psychic existence and reaching the highest happiness, the best happiness of full awakening, completely free of all faults, and having all the realizations in inner quality, that perfect happiness and bliss. For that to happen, may they quickly generate the awakening mind of bodhicitta, if they haven't already got it. Where it has arisen, may it never decline and always increase. May they have precious human rebirths from now on, or be born in a pure land that they have the karma for. May they be inseparable in life after life from qualified, compassionate guides like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Kyabje Sopa Rinpoche, and so on. May those guides have long lives, and may all of their wishes be perfectly accomplished. Either one, I'm dedicating, I'm completely empty of existing in the way of appearing. Likewise, the dedication, the act of dedicating, totally non-existent in the way of appearing, just like empty space. And also what we dedicated and what we dedicated it for, sentient beings for whom we dedicated, is also totally non-existent in the way of appearing. Existing, but totally non-existent in the way of appearing. And then we do a quick food offering prayer on page 179. That's 181 actually. 179 is the picture of Rinpoche offering his tea. Om ahum, om ahum, om ahum. Lama sangye, lama chötejin, lama gendunde, gungi jepo, lama de, lama namla, jepo. Please enjoy your lunch and don't forget the Buddha at your heart.